In this episode, we discuss the incredible durability of Donald Trump's support amongst his fans and GOP partisans following his conviction in New York State court last week. And later on, we'll react to Jerry Seinfeld's claim in a recent interview that America benefited from an agreed-upon hierarchy in the mid-1900s. And we'll also consider whether misogyny, that admittedly is a big part of hip-hop music, presents a unique challenge for fans who don't consider themselves to be hostile to women. Hello, welcome to the Call Like I See It podcast. I'm James Keys, and riding shotgun with me is a man who is a towering masculine figure who knows how to make those who ride with him feel safe. Tunde Ogunlana. Tunde, you ready to show the people why they call you Big Papa?
Yep, let's get into it.
All right. All right. Now, before we get started, if you enjoy the show, I ask that you hit subscribe or like or, on YouTube or your podcast app. Doing so really helps the show out. Now, we're recording this on June 4th, 2024. And Tunde, last week we saw former President Donald Trump get convicted on 34 felony counts related to falsifying records following his hush money payment to Stormy Daniels during the 2016 election. And immediately, we saw Trump fans, the Republican establishment, right-wing media, just immediately jump to his defense, not only with record-breaking fundraising, but actually attacking the legal system. And, whether it be judges, whether it be juries, and so forth. But, again, not just saying we were supporting you, but let's tear down this apparatus that did this to you. So, Tunde, what do you make of how quickly many of Trump's fans and, the right-wing media and so forth and Republican partisans really went at not just, again, the fundraising thing we can look at separately. That is a part of our system, but we're willing to attack the court system, really go at the court system and try to make the court system appear to be partisan and so forth, and going as far as attacking a judge and also the jury of his peers, in terms of really expressing their defense for Donald Trump.
I'm not surprised. Actually, I might have been actually more surprised if it was silence or crickets, or if even some of the political elites on the right agreed with the jury verdict. That would have been a bit more surprising. So,
or I guess agreed or respected the jury.
Yeah, I mean, it's just. I mean, we've had these conversations. It's becoming. I'm sure we could look at our library, and it's like an arc of evolution of some of this stuff, because the responses, let's say, of the political elites on the right, and I just say, that as a broad statement of people in the Senate, the Congress, state legislatures, governors, things like that, they showed a little bit of surprise and shock, let's say, after the events of January 6, 2021. Yeah. And that's what I mean. It's interesting that it's like things have gone into hyperdrive now. Whereas because I'm thinking about it as you're winding up the question, it's like, okay, been dealing with this for about a decade, where there's this distrust in the system that bubbled up maybe from, the fringes of the right. And there's fringes on the left that have had a distrust for the system as well, just for different reasons than what we're going to get into today. So those things have percolated to the top of leadership. But even in, let's say, 2020, 2021, there was still a little bit of resistance to all-out attacking the system by political elites outside of former President Trump himself so much. Now it's like everyone's all in, everyone remaining in the elite political status of the Republican Party. So that's why I'm saying it's not surprising. It's just, and I think that's where our conversation will get into. It's kind of like you're saying, it's like, okay, we all see this, right? So where do we go from here? Because we want to have one half of the American political establishment, which is basically, publicly at least, beginning to choose one individual over the entire system that's run this country for, and held the country together, especially the legal framework of the system since its founding in 1780, 1790. So I'll throw it back to you. Where do we go from here?
Well, I don't want to get to where just in terms of the initial reaction. I mean, to me, what's really shaping up here is that I see is what we're watching here is Donald Trump against his greatest adversary. And his greatest adversary, Donald Trump isn't particularly a partisan. He doesn't say Republican or GOP or that or die. Like, it's like he only supports the GOP members to the extent that they express fealty to him. So that's still about him. But his greatest adversary, and his greatest adversary isn't the Democrats, because he's not. Again, it's about him for him more than any political battles. He'll throw a party member under the bus if that party member crosses him, which we can point at examples of that. Just recently, Hogan in Maryland, the former governor and now Senate candidate. But his greatest adversary is the court system, because what Donald Trump is really able to do is get people to see a reality that he wants them to see. People who follow him, people who want to be on his team, or whatever it would be. People who he can attach, get in and get their emotions riled up. He's able to get them to see the reality that he wants them to see. The court system is the one place that doesn't work. That works in media, that works in news, that works in politics, that works in business. Like you can project an image and get people to see the reality that you want them to see, and then live based on that, and grow your business based on that, or grow your political following based on that. Court is the one place that doesn't work. And so when he goes to court and tries to, by the force of his personality, just say, here's what it is, and this is all that, this is all you need to know, this is all you need to happen, so do what I say, it doesn't seem to work. And so what we're seeing again is another time here that we're seeing Donald Trump against his greatest adversary, the legal system, and he lost this round. And he's done a great job in other scenarios, delaying it, playing the game, basically, because the court system can be manipulated if you pay enough for lawyers and how to keep things going forever and never come to a resolution. So this is Donald Trump's greatest adversary. And so I think it was destined to come to this, because this is the one forum that he can't just define the reality for everyone. And so, like that, I think what we're seeing here is kind of the inevitable result of someone who has been able, in a political realm, in a business realm, to define people's reality, coming to this place where, okay, well, now actually in court, you can only say things that you can back up. Like, you can't just say it. You have to actually support it with evidence. That's not where he's strong. He's good at just saying something over and over and over again. And then people forget, like, oh, yeah, who needs evidence? You can just say it. And so to me, that's what really stood out to me. And so now, it's been a progression, as you indicated. There's been this progression of, and it's been a progression / weeding out process. Anybody who wasn't willing to continue to go down this path after, say, the big lie, for example, the big lie, quote unquote, worked everywhere except court. In court, it went nowhere. But then the people who were not okay with that had to just get out of the party, or had to just shut up. And so everybody else to say, okay, yeah, I'll keep saying the big lie, even if we can't prove it. And so now this is just, this is the cherry on top. He's already weeded out everybody in the party who won't follow him down this path. And if the court's the last remaining bastion where evidence and proof and things like that matter, and you can't just will it by the force of personality, then of course Trump and all of his fans are going to have to go at that, because that's the last thing standing in the way of a reality that you have to prove.
Yeah. No, and you're right. It is becoming politics by another mean, because if again, you make a great point about the big lie, because that halfway worked in the court of public opinion. we have 40, 50%
amongst the audience.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it did
around 50% of the United States population now, and that 50%, some are extreme where it was definitely rigged. I think a majority are now questioning, like, okay, maybe there were issues with the 2020 election. So I think that the court of public opinion, it worked, the pushing of the big lie. But you're right, the court of law, where you need to have actual factual evidence and discovery happens and all that. Yeah, it didn't work, and that's where I think it matters. Now, but I want to jump back. You said something profound here that I think a lot of people don't recognize. Oh, you're welcome. But a lot of people don't recognize. Is when you said that Trump is not partisan.
Yeah.
I want to back up on that for a second, because we are so far down this kind of rabbit hole of this new reality of American politics. And a lot of things do feel very partisan. And the way not only Trump personally, but now those around him, and as we got to in answering your initial question, which is the remaining Republican politicians who remain at their respective tops, whether state legislature, Congress, Senate, you name it, they have now, it appears partisan because it's us versus them. But you're absolutely right, because as you're saying it, I was writing some notes here. It made me remember, Donald Trump was a registered Democrat until 2015. Yeah. He used to be accused, remember, coming into the 2016 primary, he had opponents like Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio and Lindsey Graham, people that now are very loyal to him, that actually were calling out his behavior and saying that he was going to pollute the GOP with his New York values, quote unquote. Yeah. So you're right. Here's a guy that is not steeped in the ideology of conservatism. He's not steeped in the Republican ideologies and things like that. He's someone that had he saw a ticket to power and more fame and all this stuff that, he seems to like through the Democratic apparatus and the Democratic Party, he probably would have gone that direction. So I think it's I just want to stop on that and say, we are this is why the GOP no longer has a platform about anything other than protecting Trump, and why it's really no longer a conservative party. We have two parties in this country, one that's center left to further left, depending on who you look at, and another party that's now just about grievance. We no longer have a
more
center
so it's
right.
it's about Donald Trump. And he uses things like grievance and so forth, but it's really
let me just finish this. The bigger point is that we no longer have a counterbalance of a center right to further right actual apparatus with an ideology behind it. It's just this kind of one side still trying to hang on to govern the way they see doing it, and the other side which is trying to attack that side for doing what you just said, which is not even that side from a political party standpoint, just the American system is catching up with Donald Trump, and the anger has nowhere to go except to be channeled at the political opponent. So,
the political opponent, but again, the anger also gets channeled at the political, ally.
The system, I guess.
The political ally will get. They declared war on this guy from Maryland this week because he said, "Hey, let's see what the jury says and so forth," because he didn't immediately express outrage and immediately try to undermine this jury ruling. They're like, we're going to end this guy's campaign. He is the Republican nominee. So it's not like there's no partisan solidarity there. And this isn't the first time. I mean, this is the whole idea of a Liz Cheney or whatever. If the partisans on their side, if their political allies don't bend the knee to Trump, then they get attacked as well. So it's at least not a two-way street of loyalty from a partisan standpoint. There's something more specific than that. The other thing that kind of jumped out to me, though, just briefly, is and you said it, and it just rigged, that term, the rigged. And we hear that so much. And it shouldn't. And I mean, this goes back to my, I've been saying this for a long time, that if this wasn't real, if this wasn't a honest to goodness attempt to take over the government, it would be very entertaining, because this is just, this is like the WWE type of stuff. But when you look at this and everything, you got one, if you got one card you like to play, it's the rigged card. Every single thing that doesn't go Donald Trump's way, he says is rigged. And it's wow. So his expectation, or the implication from that is that in his mind, everything should go his way. And if something doesn't go his way, then it had to have been rigged. It never is sometimes the ball bounces your way, sometimes it doesn't, whatever. And so to me, just go into, the election is rigged, or the Iowa, you brought that up, you reminded me about that. When he lost the Iowa caucus in 2016, it's rigged. It's man, everything is rigged against you, huh, bro? So it's everything that you don't,
I've been trying that in my marriage. Exactly. Hasn't gone as well as it's gone for him, actually.
It makes you wonder, anytime, you try that in youth sports, I guess. That's the values we'll teach our youth. If you don't win the game, it was rigged. Everything. So I don't know, man. But that to me is just, but that he can keep hitting that card or hitting that spot over and over again, and that people still respond to it. Again, his fans still respond to it in the same way. It's never I wonder sometimes, man, why does this guy does he have another card to play, or is it always the rigged card every time? But
it's the rigged card. But I just want to reverse back and address something you mentioned, because when you're addressing the gentleman from Maryland, it's just for the audience to reference. It's the the Senate candidate from Maryland is a gentleman named Larry Hogan, who just came off 8 years of being one of the most popular governors in recent memory in the state of Maryland, which is Joe Biden carried that state by 30 points, and this guy was a very popular Republican governor. So he's one of the few, if not only, Republicans in that statewide kind of political apparatus that is seen to have a very good chance to win the U.S. Senate race there.
And to flip a seat.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say is this is where it becomes, the internal dictatorship within the Republican Party when you look at it, because it's the ultimate internal cancel culture that's happened within the GOP since this whole Trump takeover 8 years ago. Whereas anyone doesn't show the most absolute fealty is just out, right? And so when I look at, let's say, the Democratic side, I would look at someone like Joe Manchin as a great example. I know that he's recently said he's retiring and he may be an independent or something, but he's been a senator for a very long time in the Democratic Party and didn't always see eye to eye with the administrations that were Democratic when they were there. But, you didn't see other Democrats out there on the news saying this guy's got to go and he's not loyal and all this kind of stuff. There was room for a little bit of breadth of, being a different type of Democrat. On the Republican side, and it's a great point because Mr. Hogan, all he said is, quote, regardless of the result, I urge all Americans to respect the verdict and the legal process. And he said there's a few other things about, the rule of law being very important in the United States.
Rule of law being what made America great. I think that might have been what set him off because in Trump's mind, Trump is what made America great.
That's a great point. and so, but here's what I'm saying is that this is where I think Republicans risk having this perpetual anger. Because when you look at the reaction, and it's a very good point you make to start this conversation, the reaction is that now the former President Trump's daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, who's the head of the RNC, was recently interviewed, and she says, well, because of this Mr. Hogan making the statement, we're no longer going to support him from the RNC level, meaning the Republican National Committee. So what you're having here is a very close Senate, which is around 50-50, and to your point, if they could flip the seat in Maryland, the Republicans might get the majority in the Senate next year from a long-term strategical standpoint. If Trump wins, they'll be able to ram a lot of stuff through. And if Biden wins, they could stop a lot of Biden's policy. But because of the narcissism...
Just say it, from a partisan standpoint, it would be very advantageous to try to flip that seat. Yeah.
So because of the narcissism and grandiosity of Donald Trump and those around him now that can't deal with any chinks to the armor, they risk now blowing up a political seat that's very important, which could actually create long-term success for the Republican Party and its goals. And that's where it's really becoming evident that this is no longer about a party and long-term goals of an ideology for the country. It's truly becoming about just this dude and everyone just protecting him over anything else. And it's just, like you said, if I was watching a movie, I'd be laughing. But the fact I got to live through this makes it kind of like, what are we doing here?
What's been revealed is he is their salvation. That's it.
Yeah, it's true. He is their retribution, the salvation, everything.
Yeah, everything. Like the hopes and dreams all ride through the man, which is fundamentally against what America, at least if you listen to the founding fathers, is about. And so
I have George Washington's farewell speech if you want to hear it.
I thought you were going to get to that. But I think the last thing I'll say on this before we get out of here, though, is just I think the progression is worthwhile as well, because the question I'm going to ask you next is, where do you think this is going? If we look at this progression, first off, as you pointed out to me earlier this week, this is exactly what, during that primary season, a lot of the other Republicans who are prominent Trump, like sycophants now, a lot of them were saying, Lindsey Graham, the Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, these guys are all saying, hey, if we go down, this guy's going to corrupt the whole party. They recognize, as many people who look at Donald Trump objectively, that he is a fundamentally corrupt person. And if you follow a fundamentally corrupt person, you have to constantly make compromises on your own values to where eventually you look up and you don't have any values anymore, except this person who you've compromised all your values for. That's how he becomes your salvation. So the progression, I actually debate in my own mind whether what we're seeing here is a bigger step. This is another step now. Like we had the insurrection was an example of a step here. A lot of when you look back at 2016, it was a lot of political type things that people had to become comfortable with, grab them by the genitals, all this other stuff. There were political type things that people had said for a long time, hey, we're not about this. And then he says, oh, okay, well, he is about this. Are you going to accept that? Or are you going to go to someone else? And they're like, okay, we'll accept it. But it's this constant progression towards, basically whatever his behavior is. If he would have done this in 2016, it's questionable whether or not people would have went along with it. But he has essentially worked people down to the extent now that by 2021, he was able to incite an insurrection to try to violently overthrow the government. And people were upset when the shock upset people for a while. And then he was able to define their reality. And so redefine their reality. Say, don't believe what you just saw. Believe what I say. And I say this. And that was successful. And so here actually is another example of that. Don't believe. Yeah, I know you've said for a long time that you believe in law and order to his followers. I know you said for a long time you believe in law and order, but don't believe that now. Don't believe in a jury system, because if it's not working in favor of me, then all of it is rigged. It's corrupt or whatever. And so what the next progression is, I don't know. But I want to ask you, and I don't know for sure. I think we can speculate. And so because we're seeing a progression. So what do you think? As far as I think. Oh, go ahead.
I just think this gets worse before it gets better. Because think about it, two things. If Donald Trump wins, he will try, I believe him, that he'll try to do his retribution stuff and all that. And unlike last time, we all know this, that, there's going to be no grownups in the room like the Pences and Mike Pence or General Kelly or these other guys. Yeah. So it'll be that type of pain.
They've weeded those people out now. They've weeded those people out. Yeah.
And so the country will go through that pain and suffering. Then you've got the option if Biden wins, Trump's still not going away. And instead of
we already know he's going to say it's rigged.
No, I know. So that's where I'm going is instead of like the 2020 where it was kind of him with his kind of cabal of henchmen like Rudy Giuliani and Roger Stone and kind of that group of people calling it out. But then, again, the political elites like the Mitch McConnells and the people, the kind of more adults in the room types kind of pushing back saying, it appears this time he would have this full support of all the Republican elites.
Entire party, yeah.
And potentially even some of these people on the Supreme Court flying their flags upside down and all that. So that's the thing to me, James, that I mean, I don't even think it concerns me anymore. I'm just prepared for it, that this is going to get worse. Probably people are going to be more violent with their rhetoric like they have been. We're going to see the Congress and the Senate folks on the right continue to try and fawn over Trump and do his bidding. And, we'll see where the American people lie with it. But I think this is going to continue. This ain't going to stop. And I don't think Democrats as a political party are prepared for this. I just don't, they don't take this serious.
Yeah, that's a big part of the issue as well, is that I think having a discussion on like this, I think that what you said as far as that this isn't going to stop is the most important takeaway here. And that we have it on good authority based on people's past reactions that no matter the outcome of the election, it's either going to be from the Donald Trump perspective, it's either going to be I win or I'm going to try to forcibly overturn it. It's one of the two. Like, it's not going to be, oh, okay, you won this time. All right, that's fine. I'll have some grace, with that. And so we know that that's the case. And like you also pointed out, we know that more people now, I mean, the biggest issue that we have is that it's apparent that the whims of Donald Trump are able to define the reality for a large number of people in this country. No matter what actually happens, whatever he says becomes their reality. And so, and we know from his background that he will say whatever benefits him from the standpoint when these things come up. So once, let's say he loses the election based on the counting of the votes, then it's going to be an assault on the electoral system in the same way that what we've seen just now is an assault on, when he lost this case, an assault on the court system. And so what we need to prepare for that, basically, from the standpoint of, okay, this is coming. There's no contingency here. This is coming. He is going to try to overwhelm the political system, and he's going to try to use the electoral system to take power first. And then if he can't use that, then he's going to try to overwhelm it. And so, and this isn't to be alarmist or anything like that. This is just kind of matter of fact. Like, it's coming. Last time it tried it, the institutions held. But as you, I think, correctly pointed out, since then, he's been able to bring more people who used to have some type of independent basis for reality other than what he says. more people who he's been able to bring more of them and now define their realities as well. And so as more and more people kind of become in this shrouded in this Trump reality that he defines what you see, what you hear, and what you believe, then the threat continues to grow. Because you no longer can show someone, say, hey, well, here's what happened, this is what your whole life you've said you believe in. It doesn't, because explaining to them what actually happened won't matter unless it comes from the mouth of Donald Trump. And so I think that's the bigger issue, that unless and until there's some way that a substantial number of people's reality aren't going to be defined by the whims and the ravings of Trump, then there's nowhere this is going to go but continue to escalate and continue to escalate and continue to escalate. And anything that stands in his way of total and absolute power is going to be attacked, not only by him, but by extension, and him creating these realities, everyone who is a follower of him. It's religious. It's to the point where it's, people call it cultish, religious. It's taking on that character at this point.
Yeah, I agree. Because it's about having faith. Really, that's where
when you define someone else's reality, that's a good word for it. It's about they have faith in you and what you're doing. Yeah. So, all right. Well, I think we can wrap this topic up from there. We appreciate everybody for joining us on it on part 1 here, and join us for the next part as well here, which will be coming up shortly.